Welcome to the Feminine Principle podcast, supporting women to let go of the ghosts from their past by exploring the hidden side of their female psyche with shamanic shadow work for women, with your host, Nicola Lucy. Welcome to the next episode of the Feminine Principle podcast, where today we are embracing the power of vulnerability. And so let me ask you, what is your relationship with vulnerability? How does being vulnerable make you feel? You see, from the moment we're born, we are vulnerable. We cannot do anything for ourselves, and therefore we have to unconsciously trust those around us to meet our basic physical and emotional needs, and to guide and support us in learning how to develop our most basic skills. However, we also experience wounding and trauma, and because of our vulnerability, we are at the mercy of others, and therefore we are exposed to their needs, their gratifications, and their expectations that can sometimes lead to neglect and abuse on an emotional, physical, psychological, or sexual level. And therefore, all of this wounding and trauma and conditioning begins to disconnect us from our true nature, and creates unconscious patterns, beliefs, and behaviors to get our basic needs met, so that we can feel loved and protected, and therefore creating an illusion of safety, security, and stability. It is then from these unconscious patterns that we live and relate with ourselves and others, moving through life, repeating them over and over again. And therefore, our early experience of vulnerability has fundamentally shaped our sense of self and our identity. Then, as we grow older, we've been conditioned to believe that being vulnerable is a weakness, and that if we show these weaknesses, our wounds, emotions, pain, and suffering will actually be judged, criticized, named, and shamed, and therefore rejected and excluded. And so we armour up. We protect our hearts, never allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, hiding behind the masks and the labels and the roles, and never showing our true selves so that we can reinforce the illusion that we are somehow safe, secure, and stable. And therefore, as a result, we keep repeating the same unhealthy patterns, living out the unconscious wounding, trauma, and conditioning, never really allowing ourselves to step fully into the power of our vulnerability and de-armor ourselves to experience something different. Therefore, we create so many limitations in our psyche that block us from experiencing more of our power and our potential because we are fundamentally afraid of being vulnerable. And so shadow work is really about building a relationship with our vulnerability so that we can face the pain and suffering we've been exposed to and that we have continued to manifest in our lives, so that we can reclaim our power buried beneath it, so we can consciously choose a different way and step into the unknown. And so my journey with vulnerability really came through the Shamanic Path. And so I did 5 years of intense training. And what this did for me was that it constantly challenged me to explore the unknown and experience the transpersonal and metaphysical aspects of all nature, aspects that cannot be explained or defined by fact. And so I had to learn over and over again how to be vulnerable, how to let my guard down, how to remove all control and expectations, and so I could step fully out of my comfort zone and to be fully present in the experience in that given moment. And as a result, what happened was that I gave myself permission to go to the very edges of my own sanity, the realms of death, dying, and beyond, to the very edges of my own psyche, to help me understand the true nature of the shadow, the soul, and the psyche, so I could be fully in service in the work that I do and help to transform female consciousness on an inner and outer, individual and collective level. But this challenged me so much, but it did fundamentally help me to step into my power and my potential and my life's calling. And so we build a relationship with the power of vulnerability every time we try something new, every time we take a different direction, or every time we make a different choice. Every time we go against or in the opposite direction of others' expectations, or every time we navigate a life crisis. These moments in our life demand our vulnerability, and so therefore we step into the power of vulnerability. We learn how to lean into the vulnerability from a place of power and curiosity and not fear and intimidation. And so we start to strengthen that relationship with our own vulnerability so we can work with it as a strength and not as a weakness. And as a result, we then start to break through the limitations of our psyche and lean into something new, learning something new about ourselves as we grow stronger and wiser and tap into more of our power and our potential. And what I love about vulnerability and shadow work is that every client who arrives at my door, I'm fundamentally asking them to have a deep and profound relationship with their vulnerability so that they can truly explore what is hidden in their psyche that is holding them back from manifesting the life and the relationships in both their personal and professional lives they wish to have and experience. And as a result, with each journey that they take deeper and deeper into their unconscious and into the hidden aspects of their psyche, they build this deeper relationship with trust in themselves, in their power and their potential. And so trust is one of the first things that gets knocked out of sync from the moment that we are born. We have learned how to trust through exposure to our family, our environment, our schooling, our education, our society. And so we truly do not really know how to trust in a healthy and balanced way. And so tapping into those deeper levels of trust by stepping into their vulnerability gives them permission to hold their power, to not be afraid of their power. And so that when they work with their power, they experience more of their potential on the other side. And what's fascinating for me is that during the program, I witnessed when they're at a crossroads, when they're on the cusp of a breakthrough, and the challenge they go through as the temptation to stay in the comfort zone, in their outdated narrative of the wounding and the trauma and the conditioning becomes so strong. And yet, it's their vulnerability and that deep inner voice coaxing them to take the next step that gives them the opportunity to break through to the other side and experience their own power and potential that they never dreamed possible. But to get there, they had to trust fundamentally in their vulnerability, to let go of their own control, their expectations, to let their guard down and step fully out of their comfort zone so they could fully experience what they were experiencing in that moment. And so let me ask you, where do you feel vulnerable in your life? What do you fear most about making changes here? And how is this fear impacting your life and your relationships? And what steps can you take to meet your vulnerability, to be in right relationship with your vulnerability? Are you ready to break free from the ghosts of your past, to live with more freedom and a clear sense of purpose and inner confidence? If so, book a chat with me to explore the potent magic of one-to-one shadow walking sessions at thefeminineprinciple.com.